One minute. MC, 1 minute.
This is a countdown. 5, 4.
Good morning, and welcome to Council Chambers for the last time for this semester. I know today's going to be a very special last session here. Today's topic is mobility, transportation, and climate action. My name is Gus Lynn Peluso. I'm a professor at Seneca College, and I'm going to be trying to keep things in order today. To get things started, I'm going to invite Seneca student Erica Umbe to deliver the land acknowledgement.
I'm very honored to acknowledge the land we find ourselves on in both of Canada's official language. Comme cette réunion est à la fois en personne et virtuelle et que nous ne sommes pas tous réunis dans le même espace, je reconnais que cette reconnaissance foncière pourrait ne pas concerner le territoire sur lequel vous vous trouvez actuellement. Nous vous demandons, si tel est le cas, de reconnaître le territoire traditionnel sur lequel vous vous trouvez et les titulaires actuels du traité. For those of us in Toronto, I would like to acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. This Civic Lab curriculum is presented by strategic partnership between the Toronto City Manager's Office in the City of Toronto and in collaboration with the 8 higher education institutions. Civic leaders from the city and their higher education institutions are forging a path of partnership and innovation between our organizations. This work includes the development of a new model for the city and academia to collaborate on multi-partner, multidisciplinary research to inform policy and program. We're going to be hearing a little bit more about research later, so stay tuned. A tremendous amount of planning between the academic institutions and the City of Toronto has gone into delivering this lineup that we're going to hear today. The City of Toronto, and Jeff Moore in particular, has secured an amazing lineup of senior staff and policy experts for each session. And I understand that today we're even going to have a special guest. Thank you to all for your partnerships, for the partners. Thank you to all the partners for having to make this possible. But before, let's start with a few housekeeping sessions. So as you know by now, we're being recorded, so that if you are going to address the meeting in any way, please do not share personal information. The session will be posted online at Civic Lab TO, and it'll be the link will be made available to your instructors within a couple of days. At the end of today's session, we're going to have a chance for Q&A. And if you were watching virtually, you can submit questions on the Q&A section at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you're here in person and you're sitting in one of the counselor seats in the front, simply raise your hand, and when you're acknowledged, push the button. That'll allow you to speak, and then be sure you mute yourself again. And if you're somewhere else, just put up your hand and someone will come with a portable mic to have you speak. Today we're going to hear from Andrew Pluckett, Project Lead at Environment and Climate, Jennifer Neese, Manager, Strategic Policy and Initiatives, Transportation Service, and Adam Diveston, Research Analyst, Data and Analytics Union, Transportation Services. Jeff? Okay. So, I guess we're going to start with Andrew. We're going to bring Andrew up to speak about environment and climate. Andrew?
Thanks, Gus, and thank you everyone for being here and inviting us to speak today. Just going to get my timer started here so I stay on track. I have a lot of content. I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can. Actually, I didn't ask you about advancing the slides. How are we doing that? Oh, they do it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, hi, my name is Andrew Plunkett. I'm a project lead in the Environment and Climate Division at the City of Toronto. Our division works on a broad array of environment and sustainability and climate initiatives. I'll tell you a bit about that in a moment. Next slide, please. This is just an outline of what I plan to cover about me and about my work at the city, what climate change looks like in Toronto at the moment, how Torontonians and residents and people in our city feel about climate change, why and how the city is addressing climate change. I'll tell you a little bit about our climate strategy, the path to net zero emissions, which is a key component of the strategy, and a little bit about some public consultation we're doing in case you're interested in being involved. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read this. You don't need to read this, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got here. So I became interested in the environment and sustainability, or sustainable development as it was called back in the day when I was in high school. And I went to university. I did a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science, but I focused a lot of my research and my studies on environment. And then after that, I came here to Toronto and I did a master's in environmental studies in the planning program at York University. So that's sort of how I got into my career. If you could jump to the next slide, please, you'll see this very detailed and fancily designed graphic that I did. And I just wanted to share this with students because I think, you know, there's not really, I don't think anymore there's like a typical way of how you get into a job that you want to get into. You know, so some people graduate and they find a job with an organization they like and they work their way up and they work their, you know, their whole career. I don't think that's very common anymore, but my dad was like that, for example. That would be like this blue line. But I think career paths nowadays are a little bit more like this green line. So when I graduated, I got an internship. Then I worked for a couple of nonprofits for about 8 years. Then I worked up at York University on campus sustainability for about 7 years, and for the last 7 years I've been with the city. I feel like now I'm doing sort of exactly the kind of work that I envisioned doing when I was doing my master's degree, but it took a long time and a lot of different, you know, routes to get to where I am now. I just wanted to share that with you. Next slide, please. So about our division, like I said, we coordinate and we're held accountable for the city's environment and sustainability outcomes through a variety of ways. I won't really go into this or read this, but our division collaborates internally with several other divisions, and we also collaborate externally. And you know, we're directed, our work is directed here on the floor of City Council. So we receive direction from Council on a variety of programs and policies that we do. And I'm going to pause for 1 minute because we have a special guest.
Well, I'm really sorry to interrupt Andrew. Really sorry to interrupt Andrew. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our special guest today, Her Worship, Olivia Chow, Mayor of Toronto.
There's a timer. Let me stop your timer. Good morning, everyone. Wait. Good morning. Okay, students, you're young. Supposed to be energetic, right? Good morning. Ah, that's better. First off, congratulations. It's the last class. Yeah, it is. Now, I took a chance to look through the curriculum before coming up, which is probably why I was late. And you've covered a lot. Planning, financing, governance, arts. You have Dr. Diamond here. I'm like, wow. Okay, let me focus here. Intergovernmental conversations. And today, mobility, transportation, and climate. And because your speaker left a phone here, I can see what his deck transformed TO. Wow, okay. There are a lot of challenges facing the city. You've had a chance to hear from some of the folks helping to tackle those challenges. Like, how do we manage and pay for stormwater runoff? When it pour rain, what do we do? Okay? And the basin, it's just everything. Do we do big pipes? Do we have more porous service? Do we do a combination of all of those? What does a private homeowners do? What does a big business or industry should do? Lots to chew on, right? It's not an easy conversation. What about a fun topic like a bike lane? My latest favorite conversation. Should we? Shouldn't we? Where should it be? How do we do it? What about those ride-sharing apps? Oh, there are a few companies, huh? Should they have 50,000 drivers, 75,000 drivers, 100,000 drivers? Should we have any say over how many drivers? I don't know. Should they use EVs, electric cars, or not? Okay. And those are just hot topics for today's class. Maybe I should stick around here. I'll look at the deck at least. And last week's topic was housing and homelessness, and you had a chance to hear from some folks helping to tackle housing crisis in Toronto. You and I know that it takes a multi-pronged approach. We've dramatically cut how long it takes to approve, and whether it's official plan amendment. How many planning students are here? A few? Okay. So when I say OPA, you know what I'm talking about, official plan amendments, site plans, committee of adjustment. We've dramatically moved it from 5 years to 1 year, so it makes it a lot faster. How are we going to build affordable housing? I'm about to go and open up a cooperative housing. There are different forms of housing. What about cutting taxes and charges, like development charges, to encourage more affordable housing? Is that a good way to go? Zoning rules, how do we change that? Should we relax it or reverse it? That's a lot, and there's a lot more we can do, like the pressing topics facing our city. Kids are going to bed hungry. 1 out of 10 Torontonians don't earn enough, so they end up in the food bank. So lots and lots of work that we have to do. But I know you are super smart, and I need you to join us. I hope you feel that inspiration rising as you listen to all this presentation and say, wait a second, I have a different idea. Or I really agree with this idea and I need to push it. So I hope you can stay engaged. Maybe you can even work here after you graduate. Always looking for new folks, aren't we? Yeah, we're all getting a bit older, so come join us maybe. Stay engaged, come to the committees, come and make deputations. We do listen. You can write to us. I read your emails, and help organize your neighbor for change, or your classmates, co-workers. Maybe one day you'll be sitting where you're sitting now, some of you. Run for office, be a counselor, be a mayor, and why not, right? Most importantly, I hope you all feel like you can be better citizens and residents of our city. A huge thank you to all the Civic Lab TO staff and facilitators. Thanks for inspiring our wonderful young people that are gathered here today. Back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Chow. Mayor Chow gave an inspirational speech, and I just wanted to let her know that about maybe 40 years ago, maybe not that much, I was at a meeting with her, a community organizing meeting, and she inspired me then. That's why I'm still doing this kind of work I am now. And hopefully you guys feel the inspiration that she just gave us, and that in 40 years you'll be here running the city. So thank you, Mayor Chow. Okay, Andrew, can we ask you to come back up here and tell us about that squiggly line?
Okay, thanks. That was great. Really nice to hear from the mayor. So she did stop my timer, which is very nice of her. I'll restart. There we go. Okay, so next slide, please. I think we've heard enough about the Environment and Climate Division. So what is climate change? I have a video that I'd like to share with you. I could explain what climate change is. You probably know what climate change is, but our division did a video that sort of summarizes it for those who don't have a high level of familiarity with it. So Ferdinand, if you could go ahead and play that.
Changes observed scientifically in Earth's climate since the early 20th century are primarily driven by human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels. Activities such as heating and cooling our homes, driving gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles, and plugging in devices and appliances consumes fossil fuel energy sources like natural gas and oil. Burning fossil fuels for energy releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Even our waste that ends up in landfills will result in methane gas emissions. Greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, often referred to as GHGs, such as carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4, are necessary to keep our planet warm enough to sustain life. However, in excessive quantities, they trap too much heat in the atmosphere, causing the Earth to heat up. That's called global warming, and global warming causes climate change. Climate change is a long-term change in the average weather patterns that come to define local, regional, and global climates. Climate change is causing more extreme rainstorms, heat waves, wildfires, droughts, and rising sea levels around the world. Cities are now more at risk from flooding events, extreme heat, and other climate change impacts.
Great, thanks. As we get the slides back up, just quick show of hands from people. Who's heard of the term wicked problem or complex problem? Basically, I won't go into the deeper definition, but basically a wicked problem or a complex problem is a problem that doesn't have an easy solution, or a problem where you think you find a solution, but that solution creates other problems. And this is what climate change is like. It's quite complicated. The scientific solutions are in front of us, but there are many other challenges with implementing those solutions. Next slide, please. Actually, two more, and then right after the video. Yeah, thank you. So what does climate change look like in Toronto? This is a photo of the Toronto Islands from 2017. The Toronto Islands underwater, so if you've ever gone there, this was a regular occurrence for a few years in a row in the springtime. Next slide, please. This is the DVP from just back in June. The mayor actually touched on this about solutions to flooding. Do you build more pipes? Do you try and stop the water at the source? Next slide, please. This is the weather from 2021 in the summer, a heat wave going through our region. Next slide, please. And this is smoke from wildfires last summer. So if you were here last summer, you would have noticed that as you come out of your house, the sky is orange. This was coming from fires in northwestern Ontario and Quebec. I was in a presentation earlier this week about climate and climate anxiety and with researchers who said, like, you shouldn't lead with the fire and the doom and gloom. So I didn't lead with it, at least. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that we are starting to experience the effects of climate change regularly. And this is sort of what they look like, and it's likely to get worse. But there's good news in that there's things we can do about it. Next slide, please. So this is just a sort of a graph that encapsulates what you saw in the photos. And so what this means is we're going to continue to get hotter days, we're going to continue to get more hotter days and longer heat waves, and we're going to continue to get more rainfall in shorter amounts of time. And so this has impacts on our day-to-day lives. There's other climate change effects as well. For instance, I showed you the smoke, but this gives you a sort of a sense of what's happening. Next slide, please. How do residents feel about climate change in Toronto? Next slide. Every few years, our division does what's called a climate perception survey. This is from 2021. The next one, I think, is being organized right now. I won't read all of this, but in a nutshell, people are interested and concerned about climate change in Toronto. But the interesting thing about these numbers is that a lot of people feel like they don't know what they can do, and they're not aware that the city even has a climate strategy. So these are things we need to improve on. Next slide, please. How and why is Toronto addressing climate change? Next slide. For the why part, I mean, there's a number of reasons. Obviously, one of the main ones is we feel like it's the right thing to do. And also because we're directed by Toronto City Council right here on this floor to do this work. But just a reminder that Canada is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, along with about 195 other countries, and that agreement, it's a non-binding agreement, but it's basically asking countries to reduce their emissions so we can limit temperature increase to under 2 degrees Celsius. And I'll show you a bit about sort of where we're at on that path in a sec. Next slide. So you'll see on this graph on the left, this was the first year since pre-industrial times that the Earth's temperature over the course of the year was 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. So this isn't a good sign. It's a bit of a problem. We're not considered to be above 1.5 until we have, you know, a number of years in a row. So you'll see how the temperature can go up and down. It can fluctuate. But what we're interested in is the long-term trends. And you can see the trend is a warming trend, and that warming trend creates the extreme weather that I've been talking about. Next slide, please. So what is the city's response? Next slide, please. Our climate strategy is called Transform TO. Next slide. And it was originally approved by Toronto City Council right here on this floor in 2017. And then in 2019, Council declared a climate emergency. And that's around the time that I joined our division. And they directed us as staff to recalibrate the strategy. The original strategy had a long-term goal of an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. They asked us to find a way to get to net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. And so I'll tell you a bit more about what that's about. That strategy was adopted in December 2021 with a long-term goal of net zero by 2040 and an interim target of 65% reductions in emissions by 2030. Next slide. So this is, there's a lot of information in this work. If you download the strategy, there's like 125 pages, so it's hard to explain it in a nutshell. But if I had to summarize it in like one graphic, this would be it. What are the critical steps to getting to net zero? The first one is demonstrating carbon accountability locally and globally by establishing a carbon budget. And so the city has that now. This is our first year with a carbon budget where we track the carbon that the city internally, our corporation of the City of Toronto, uses on an annual basis. So that's a good step, and we're just beginning this work. Second, accelerate a rapid and significant reduction in fossil natural gas use in buildings. I'll tell you more about our emissions inventory in a moment. Increase access to low carbon transportation and increase local renewable energy. So there's a lot in the strategy, a lot of actions, a lot of information, but these are sort of the key things that we're trying to accomplish in the strategy. Next slide, please. These are our 2030 goals. I'm not going to read these, but today we're talking about transportation. So the two that would be most relevant to today's discussions would be our EV target of 30% registered vehicles are electric by 2030. I think the current number is in the 4% range, but so it's low. But the good news is when I started this work 5-6 years ago, it was only like 1% of vehicles were electric. So we've already increased a lot. We have more work to do on that. And then 75% of school work trips under 5 kilometers walked, biked, or by transit. So we're trying to also enable people to get out of cars and use active transportation and transit, especially for shorter trips. Next slide, please. Guiding principles, I won't read all this either, but the important thing here, and the mayor touched on this in her remarks, there are significant equity and affordability issues happening in the city already. So we have to make sure that the climate action, that the work that we do doesn't exacerbate or make these issues worse. So we don't want to make affordability worse. In fact, we want to make it better. So one example of that is that when you reduce your energy use, you reduce your energy bill. So that's a good thing. You're spending less, right? But it does require investment, and that's the tricky part. Next slide, please. And then this is just another way of saying that climate, there are co-benefits to climate work, and climate work doesn't exist in a vacuum. So we don't do it just for the climate piece, right? It also can create good local jobs. It can clean the air and the water. It can improve affordability. So we try and connect all the dots because we're trying to build a livable city, and our division is just one of many that are working on all sorts of issues across the city to make Toronto a great place to live. Next slide, please. So this is another short video just to explain what net zero means. So if you could please cue that up.
The city's goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2040 to mitigate climate change. But what exactly is net zero? Net zero emissions occurs when any GHGs emitted into the atmosphere are cancelled out by an equal number of GHGs removed from the atmosphere. To achieve net zero emissions in Toronto, we need to change how we live, work, and travel. We must transition away from burning fossil fuels to power our homes, buildings, and vehicles and move toward clean energy and renewable energy sources that do not emit carbon dioxide and other GHGs. This transition is sometimes called decarbonization. Once the energy transition is as complete as possible, any remaining GHG emissions can be netted out by actions that remove GHGs from the atmosphere, such as restoring natural lands and soils or through direct air capture and storage technologies.
So basically, net zero is reducing emissions as much as possible and then canceling any remaining emissions out. Next slide, please. And I think you can jump 2 ahead, and then 1 more, please. So we track this through this middle report, which is the sector-based emissions inventory. So every year, on an annual basis, we collect all this, a lot of data on how many, what amount of greenhouse gas emissions are generated in our city boundary. The reason why this says 2021 is that it takes basically 2 years to put this report together. It's very data intensive, and we have to wait for information from other levels of government as well. The 2022 inventory is coming out very soon, like probably next month, so unfortunately I don't have that for you yet. And we also track on the Progress Accountability Report on the left, that's more like our actions, like where are we in our actions. But let me tell you a bit about the inventory. I know I'm running a bit short on time. Next slide, please. Where are we at? So our emissions come from 3 key sources: buildings, transportation, and waste. Buildings is the largest at 56%, followed by transportation. So if you look at that, that shows you that 91% of our emissions are from 2 sources. Next slide, please. And this tells you a bit more detail about it. For buildings, it's 55% residential buildings, 34% commercial and institutional. So that would be, hospitals or schools, or shopping malls, for example, and then 11% industrial, like factories. Transportation emissions, almost 70% come from passenger vehicles, with 16% from light commercial and 15% from heavy vehicles. Waste emissions are almost all from methane from landfills. Next slide, please. So where are we on the path to net zero? From our 1990 baseline, where we were just close to 25 megatons of emissions community-wide, we're now at 14.5. So that's a 41% decrease. So we've gone down. So that's part of the good news, right? We're going down. But we know that we need to do more to get to net zero. So you'll see our targets and our strategy there mapped out on the graph. We have met and exceeded our 2020 target. 2020 was a COVID year, so emissions were quite low that year. It's gone back up, you'll see, because people are back out in cars. So we do need to sort of get back on that sort of downward trajectory to meet our next targets. Next slide, please. And this is just to show that this is all happening in a situation where the city is growing in population, and so we don't do this on a per capita basis. This is absolute emissions. So as the city grows, we still need to reduce our overall emissions. So again, that's part of the complex problem piece. Next slide, please. What is the next net zero strategy action plan? Next slide. So the action plan is part of the strategy. Basically, if those of you studying planning, you probably know a bit about this, but like strategies are typically longer term. So our strategy is up to 2040, but the action plans are meant to be shorter term, right? They're meant to be more nimble. We do 4 to 5 year action plans. The current one is leading us into next year, and it's ending in 2025. So we're currently working on the next action plan, 2026 to 2030. Next slide, please. The types of actions that are in here, and you'll hear from some of my colleagues on the transportation work being done. We have programs to help people decarbonize their buildings or improve their energy efficiency or insulation. There's loan programs, retrofit programs. The Toronto Green Standard is a building standard for new buildings, which is moving them towards near zero buildings. We have a solar program, Greenville Initiative for large buildings. For cycling, my colleagues will talk more about this, for transportation, cycling network plan and bike share, Rapid TO, which is bus rapid transit, public transit service, EV strategy. And for waste, there's a number of programs as well. And then finally, in the far column, we encourage people to get involved and to talk about it and work at their neighborhood level. Next slide, please. So we're doing some public consultation currently on this action plan, and so I'm glad I get a chance to talk to you. Next slide. You'll see, and if you have a look at our materials, you'll see that we're talking to people about 2 things, about how they're experiencing climate, and then also what they can do about it. Next slide, please. So, you know, if you look at our materials, we ask about, you know, the impacts that you're feeling on climate, but we're also asking, okay, my timer going off. I'll wrap up. We're also asking people about the types of actions they can do to reduce their emissions. And I have some materials here that I can share with you. Next slide. And we're asking just some key questions again on what you're doing, what you'd like to do, what challenges you're facing, and what supports you could use to overcome these challenges. Next slide, please. So there's an online survey, we've done some webinars, we're encouraging group discussions. So as students, if you're interested, if you have a student group, an environment group, any group, please, you know, check out our website, and you can download the group discussion guide. You can hold a discussion, and you can send your notes into us. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. And then my final slide just, I think, shows the website. All the information is there, toronto.ca/net zero action plan. And again, if you have any questions about this or anything else, happy to answer them. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You know, whenever I attend a talk on climate, I usually leave feeling a little bit uneasy, a little bit stressed, a little anxiety. But knowing that people like Andrew are on the ball here in the city and hearing this makes me feel a little bit better. Not completely better though, Andrew, but a little bit better. So thank you very much for that. Now, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Neese, she's Manager of Strategic Policy and Initiatives, Transportation Services.
I'm also getting my timer ready.
Okay.
Good morning. As you've just heard, I'm Jennifer Neese. I'm the Manager of Strategic Policy and Initiatives in Transportation Services, which I feel anybody who's looking for a career path, I strongly encourage you to pursue transportation, and maybe some of what I say will help convince you. It's a very exciting, dynamic division of the city that has a massive impact on the quality of life and what people experience day to day in Toronto. Next slide. So this is a very old photo of me, but thinking about how I got where I am today, my bicycle is a big part of that. My career path has been very much like that squiggly green line that Andrew showed. Thank you for illustrating that so well. I started off in an academic path that was much more focused on science, on like gathering data, and through that process, I learned two things. First of all, many other people are much better than me at the hard science research stuff. And two, all that science only matters if we apply it, if we use it to make good decisions. And particularly the science around climate change is an area where we have known a lot for many, many years, and we have struggled as a globe, as a society, to act on that science. And so I have largely put my career towards trying to influence the behavior, the decision-making, how cities are built in relation to climate science. But transportation touches so many other things, which is what excites me about it. It's not just about reducing emissions and air quality and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. It also affects quality of life. It affects how people interact with each other, what they're able to get to, how vibrant are our streets, and how does that contribute to a healthy economy and to being a great place to live. And it has a huge impact on equity. And in fact, transportation barriers, I think, have been a limiting factor for enabling equitability in our city for marginalized communities that don't have access to cars, perhaps physical disabilities that make walking or driving very challenging. And the fact that our city is so spread out and so sort of reliant on being able to travel long distances in small periods of time, overcoming those challenges is a wicked problem, as Andrew said. And I would add to his definition of wicked problem that it's not just something where it's really hard to solve or that it's the solutions bring up other problems. For us, wicked problems are things that cannot be solved with only one thing. It's a whole combination of many, many different things. How can we make the King Street streetcar run more reliably so that people want to take transit, so they feel they can rely on it? How can we make cycling feel safer so people feel that they have that as a legitimate mode of transportation? So now I'm getting way far behind. But we are building the city of the future. And the challenge for public servants right now is that we have pressure from people who live here right now and want something to be a certain way right now. But we're investing in infrastructure that is going to have to serve the needs of people who live here 30 years from now. We don't rebuild streets every year. And so we have to be thinking out to what kind of city are we going to need and what kind of city do we want several decades from now. And every decision that we make now can either open or restrict the decisions that future generations can make, which is the fun and the challenge of working in the public sector. Next slide. So, transportation services. Our division is broad and covers a number of different things, but together we have a mission to build and maintain a resilient transportation network so that people connect with places, activities, and communities that they value. Transportation is not an end in itself, it's a means to accomplishing all those other things that are important to us. We have a vision to keep people moving safely in our diverse and changing city, and we do that work on the principles of safe and healthy communities, quality service, access for everyone, and resilient solutions. And I'll get into that a bit more in a minute. Next slide. I won't read every bit on this slide, but transportation services really manages or oversees nearly everything that happens in the street, from the property line to the property line. So Cafe TO, snow clearing, signs and markings, traffic signals and coordinating all the signals across the city, planning and designing all the pieces of the transportation infrastructure, including now more green streets, trying to get more flood mitigation built right into the transportation right-of-way. We also cover lots of policy stuff, which is where my unit focuses, looking at what is allowed on the streets and where and under what conditions. How can we ensure that pedestrians get a fair shake? Because there's lots of talk about the faster moving vehicles, but pedestrians, everybody's a pedestrian at some point. And making sure that it's accessible for all types of pedestrians, regardless of their level of ability. Traffic flow, bylaws for parking, stopping, standing, delivery zones, car share, crossing guards. There's a wide range of things for every kind of interest and set of expertise. Next slide. Again, I won't read every bit of this in detail, but each bubble on this picture represents a different public agency or group of private agencies like utility companies or business improvement associations or another division within the city that has some kind of influence or role in managing the transportation right-of-way. Transportation Services, our division, is just the yellow one. And so when you think about a wicked problem, things that involve many different viewpoints, many different things that have to be scheduled and taken into account, think about all of those different agencies and organizations that have a role and that have to be consulted and accommodated as we make changes in the transportation space. So if you're frustrated at the slow pace, remember that we're trying to make sure that everybody's engaged and taken care of. Next slide. So this morning I'm going to focus on 3 areas of work that my unit leads that have a relationship to mobility and to climate. You've heard a lot about climate change and emissions reductions from Andrew, which is fabulous. It was a great introduction to what I'm talking about. Every time Transportation Services does something that makes it easier for people to or even other parts of the city, make it easier for people to shop locally, to choose walking, cycling, or public transit instead of driving. Anything that pushes them to transportation choices that have fewer emissions, even installation of EV parking to shift to lower emissions vehicles, all of that contributes to solving this wicked problem of climate, of greenhouse gas emissions. So, having said that, my unit is leading the other side of the climate equation, which for the Transportation Services Division, and each division across the city is either well underway or beginning to think about this under the leadership of Environment and Climate, and this is climate resilience. And so, next slide. We are recognizing that climate change is happening. Even if we shut off all of our emissions today, which we all know is not going to happen overnight, there are still climate effects that we are going to feel and that we have to prepare for. So climate resilience is thinking about what risks are we going to face because of changing weather patterns, and what plans or different infrastructure design or operating procedures can we put in place to reduce how much those extreme weather events affect us. Next slide. This is a picture of Finch Avenue in Toronto in 2005. And it really, the mayor did a great introduction mentioning floodwater management. There are 3 things that contributed to this catastrophic infrastructure failure. The first was a very heavy rainfall. The second was the fact that we have paved so much surface in the city that the water that falls rushes into our rivers and streams much faster than it did before we had so much impermeable surface. And so we have to be able to accommodate that water in large volumes in small spaces a lot faster and a lot larger volumes concentrated in those small spaces than we would have if the water was able to infiltrate into the soil at the point where it fell. The third piece that contributed to this catastrophe was that there was a large culvert underneath the road that the river was intended to flow through, but there hadn't been appropriate management procedures in place to make sure that it didn't get full of branches and garbage and debris, and over time that debris built up, and that constricted the amount of space for the water to flow through. And there was so much water in a short period of time that it destroyed the road. We're very, very lucky it didn't also destroy the water and gas and electrical and broadband infrastructure that flowed underneath that street. I don't know why, but thank goodness. And it took tens of millions of dollars to fix just this, let alone the other millions that were spent through the insurance industry and the public sector to recover from that heavy rainstorm in 2005. So this is just one very graphic example of why we need to work on climate resilience. Next slide. So quickly, we are doing some things in transportation services to adapt to extreme heat. We're looking at new pavement types that can prevent this rippling of the asphalt that happens when heavy vehicles sit on asphalt that's been softened by extreme heat. And we all know that your computer will fail or a server room will fail if it gets overheated. Our traffic signal boxes are the same. And so we're putting measures in place to try and keep those more aerated and cool during extreme heat events. Next slide. We are making better plans for dealing with extreme snow conditions through upgraded weather monitoring and better procedures in place for how we will go about prioritizing what streets get cleared first. Especially when there's an extremely heavy snowfall that requires us to scoop up the snow and transport it off of the roads rather than just plowing it to the sides. Next slide. So for extreme rain, culvert management, that's the photo on the right-hand side. I already talked about that in relation to Finch Avenue, but there are many, many culverts and bridges across the city where this is a concern, and lots of other stakeholders that we have to collaborate with to make sure that that's done well. In the middle image, you can see the bioswales, various types of systems that are capturing more rainwater closer to where it falls and able to allow it to enter into our flood management or our stormwater management systems at a slower rate so that we can spread out how quickly that rain gets into the rivers, but even into people's basements. And then finally, lower dawn traffic management. On the left-hand side, we have gate closures now that prevent people from getting onto the Don Valley Parkway when we know that a flood is likely. And so we reduce the chance that people will be caught in the kind of flooding that Andrew showed in one of his photos. Next slide. Okay, so that's a little bit on climate resilience. I'm moving now to micromobility, which is one of the pieces we work on related to reducing emissions by having lower impact modes of transport, but also increasing equity because they are more affordable, they're easier to store in small living accommodations, and we can fit more of them in a finite amount of space on our streets. Next slide. This is a variety of forms of what we term micromobility. So these are small, lightweight, often human-powered or human-powered in combination with an electric motor or purely electric modes of transport. Everything from bicycles to low-speed electric motorcycles, low-speed vehicles like the car that's down in the bottom left, and electric cargo bikes so that we can transport more of our goods and services or more of our goods around the city without needing large trucks that have a lot of challenges with delivery space. And on the right-hand side, I'm sure you're all familiar with our bike share program run by the Toronto Parking Authority, which is what we call shared micromobility. That's an opportunity for people to kind of to pay a membership, sort of a subscription fee, to get access to bicycles, and somebody else takes care of the maintenance and storage and parking, and then you can have multimodal trips. Oh, I'm going to bike down to work, but I'm going to take the transit back because it's going to rain today, for example. Next slide. There are, as Andrew said, every opportunity that comes up to solve a problem does sometimes bring other concerns and considerations. But on balance, we think that promoting micromobility and encouraging and enabling it in the city has positive benefits overall compared to if everybody was choosing to drive. It's lower emissions, lower cost option, easier to get to and from public transit than, say, driving because we can't surround our transit stations with just parking. Takes up less road space. It inflicts less harm if there's a collision. And the electric assist that is becoming more and more popular encourages more people who maybe have a lower fitness level or want to travel further and carry heavier loads, enables them to do that. The challenges that they are bringing up is that compared to pedestrians, these modes of travel are heavier, higher speed, and very quiet. So when people use them on the sidewalks, it's extremely unsettling for pedestrians, and that's the best case scenario. The worst case is collisions between pedestrians and people using high-speed micromobility. And so we're trying in my unit to deal with that policy issue and enforce more appropriate road behavior where individuals understand that they need to respect other road users. Next slide. Complete Streets is one of the ways that we are trying to make sure that we accommodate and encourage and support all these different kinds of travel. So in this image, we've got a reasonably wide sidewalk. This is on Yonge Street, a bike lane, and then space for motor vehicles. So we're creating space for everyone. Bike lanes is a very hot topic in the media right now, and I just want to remind everybody that we have a growing population and a growing desire by people to be able to move around and move around effectively. But our road space cannot get any bigger. We can't destroy our downtown vibrant streets and all those small businesses just to widen Bloor or just to widen Yonge Street, because then people won't have a place to go and we will have solved the problem because they won't have to move anywhere. So we need to find ways to fit more travel in the same amount of space that we already have. And in the city's opinion, micromobility is a valuable way to do that. And walking. Okay, next slide. The last piece that I want to talk about is really, it's pedestrian focused, but through the lens of accessibility. So making sure that regardless of whether somebody is visually impaired or they have a hearing impairment, or they use a mobility aid of some kind, either a wheelchair or a walker or a mobility scooter or even a cane, that they feel that they can safely and confidently move along our sidewalks. And when we create space that's accessible for people with disabilities, we also make it safer and more accessible for children, for seniors, whether or not they have a mobility device, for people with strollers and people with shopping carts, and it makes pedestrian experience better for everyone. Next slide. There are different challenges in Toronto because we have very urban spaces and we have very suburban spaces. And so talking about accessibility, I'm just going to split into two. In the more urban spaces, we have high pedestrian volumes, which actually create congestion on the sidewalks. We talk a lot about congestion on the roads, but it's a reality on sidewalks too. Some sidewalks, because of older neighborhoods, they are narrower than the standard that we would like to follow right now, and it's a challenge to be able to determine how we can get more space in that pedestrian area. Lots of competition for the sidewalk space with street furniture, with market stalls, with Cafe TO and sidewalk cafes, all of which are really valuable, important pieces of our city, but they do infringe on pedestrian space. Construction is an ongoing challenge because it is so temporary, it has so many different people involved, and it can shift from place to place through the course of one particular project. And winter maintenance. It's only very recently that we've been able to get a fleet of vehicles that are small enough to clear the sidewalks and make sure that even in winter weather, our sidewalks are wide enough for a wheelchair to pass by and firm enough or have enough friction on them, lack of ice, to be able to, oh darn, okay, I'm out of time. I only have one more slide. Okay. Making sure that the ice is cleared up is important, and it takes specialized equipment to be able to do that. Next slide. Thank you for your patience as I race through. This is the suburban environment that does experience some of those same challenges as urban about making sure that the winter maintenance is done properly, but also for pedestrians, suburban areas have very long distances often in between origins and destinations of trips. The streets are wider because there are more lanes, and often the curves at the corner are designed in a way that allows cars to move much, much faster. And that creates extra risk when crossing and extra distance that a pedestrian needs to cross. There's also more fast-moving motor traffic and noise. The crossing times at intersections can be inconsistent. There are places that are missing sidewalks. There's less availability of seating, even though the walking distances are often longer. And so that's a separate set of challenges that we are trying to pay a lot of attention to as well in my division. And all that together will hopefully help contribute to livability in the city and also the climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So let me get this straight. We have a wicked problem. We do the science. We get the data. From that data, we come up with ideas. And then somehow your job is to put it into practice on a very limited budget. Sounds easy. Hopefully some of you will like that job in the future. Thank you very much. That's amazing. Now I'd like to ask Adam to come up, who's an expert in data, in data analysis and analytics, and is going to talk to us about transportation services. Thanks, Adam.
Hello, hello. Try to stick to the timer here, but haven't been having great success at that so far. Thank you, Gus, and thank you to the organizers and everyone here. I really support the vision of Civic Lab TO, and I'm glad you're all here and glad to be a part of it. I'm Adam Diveston. I work on the data collection team in data and analytics unit in transportation services. And I'm going to be talking about our team and getting into some of the programs and projects that we're working on, specifically about micromobility, a bit more focused on the nitty-gritty of a data team working in a municipal environment. Next slide, please. So transportation data it's increasingly complex. And how do we deal with that? Our unit's mission is to support evidence-based decision-making across Toronto. And there's a lot of initiatives that we support and policies like road safety initiatives, signals, pedestrian crossovers, traffic calming, neighborhood area planning, priorities like active TO, cafe TO, rapid TO, transform TO, a lot of TOs. I think we have a moratorium on naming your initiative TO at this point. But these are really important things like active TO, prioritizing active transportation in Toronto, cafe TO prioritizing space on our streets for street-side cafe patios, rapid TO prioritizing surface transit routes. So we're at Data and Analytics responsible for many of the division's core data sets, mainly being traffic volumes, collisions, speed data, and travel time data. And we try to provide a holistic understanding of the impacts of these projects on road safety. Vision Zero is an important partner that we have in the collisions and road safety file. Equity and accessibility, environment, traffic management, congestion, neighborhood impacts. Overall, we're trying to do high impact work, not what's easy to do, but what needs to be done. Next slide. These are some of our goals and values, and in our unit, we have I guess, diverse knowledge and experience in our staff, and I guess part of the mandate is to give that staff the flexibility to be creative and explore new tech and novel solutions. Move away from being reactive to specific asks or specific crises and be more proactive, looking at citywide trends and understanding these data sets when people ask questions, anticipating the questions. This is hard. It requires modern approaches. We're committed to working in the open. We publish as much as we can on the open data portal on toronto.ca, and we publish our repositories on GitHub. The code is there to use and modify if you want. We use open source software like QGIS, Postgres databases, and we work on automation, which means there's more time spent on quality, more time spent on analysis and publishing, and less on data technicians, counting, and input. Next slide. This is a great slide that shows like the diversity of backgrounds of people on this team. It's an amazing like mix of transportation professionals, all types of engineers, but also policy and planning experts. We have cartographers, we have road safety experts, we have software developers, we have people with physics backgrounds, we have people with forestry backgrounds. I'm a civil engineer by training. I went to University of Waterloo, and I worked in engineering consulting and a lot more traditional engineering for about 10 years. And during that time, I did a master's. I worked in a bunch of different roles on site, building infrastructure, building dams, channels, these things. And I wanted to kind of continue learning throughout all that. And I ended up doing a boot camp in data science and software engineering, and found my way to this, this team, I guess, thinking back to why I got into engineering, which was my sort of love of geography and earth systems and putting that together with engineering. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is you're not bound to what you're studying right now. It's more important to find what your passions are, what you're interested in, and let that lead your career. It's your career. You're in the driver's seat. Don't let people tell you what you should do or not. Next slide. So we're organized into 4 teams. I'm going to talk about data collection a bit more later, but the other teams are data science, who do amazing work doing predictive modeling, such as high injury networks and mid-block safety models, trying to understand how can we predict where collisions are going to happen based on road configurations, based on behavior that we see. They also do work on congestion monitoring, project monitoring requests. Data ops, they have a rich vehicle for hire data set. That's data from Uber, Lyft, the taxi industry, and have published reports on that. They also do travel time work and the laborious, intensive work of transforming, pulling data. We pull data from so many places, and there's a lot of back-end work to do that. So kudos to them. Move is a digital products team. They've built a web app that everyone in the city and outside the city as well use to access our transportation data and collision data. It's a modern type web app, mapping based. And underlying all of this, I would say, is publishing this data to open data so people can get the data sets and use them, and data cleaning and quality control. Next slide. I like this slide, but I'm not going to talk through it too much. One thing here is data is highly visible. Like, we're publishing and we're in the public eye. Once things are out there, you can't really take them back. So we have to be able to stand behind what we're putting out there. Next slide. These are some of our data sources. I'll talk through a few of them, like GPS probe and Bluetooth Wi-Fi are, you may have heard of the, like, connected vehicles. That is really good for getting things like travel times or the time between nodes on a network. And we can stitch those all together to get like longer distance travel times based on individual vehicles. Traffic counts, we still do a lot of that, a lot of car counting. That's never going to go away, but also multimodal counting and pedestrian counting, school crossing guard, pedestrian studies, pedestrian behavior. Vehicle detector data is traffic counting, but 24/7 from in-ground loops in our highways or intersections that can count in an automated way. Collision data we receive from the police, either from attended crashes or self-reporting centers. Speed data is another component for, especially for road road safety, and ride-hailing data, again, the Uber and Lyft and taxi industry data that our data ops use for doing analysis. And bicycle count data, I'm going to talk about that more in a few coming slides. Next, please. This is our team within the data and analytics unit, data collection. Next slide. Previously, this program relied a lot on manual counting. You know, you'd see someone on the side of the road with a clipboard counting cars. We continue to shift away from that. We don't do any of that in-house anymore, actually. We use vendors that collect data with radar, with these pneumatic tubes that you see in the middle photo there, less and less of those. And also video-based counting. They set up cameras and then can use machine learning to identify cars, vehicle types, pedestrians, bikes, if we're lucky. And these are some of the count types listed here that we collect. Next slide. So we work hard to make sure our data is open. This is something that was built by Matt Elliott, who's a journalist in Toronto, and it uses our traffic data at intersections for all modes data set. You can see there's like 296 pages of this, but it's all sortable. It's pretty easy to visualize it, and I really like the multimodal kind of view here, like just sorting it by like total traffic, total counts here. I'm seeing some of the top ones have pedestrian mode share of like 70, 75%, like the biggest mode share of pedestrians at these like really, really high volume places in Toronto. Next slide. Some of our permanent count stations, these are installed around the city. One of them is the MyoVision cameras. These, we have about 100 of them at intersections in the city. And the view in the picture there is what this camera sees, and it uses machine learning to identify vehicles and their turning movements. So we get everyone that was turning left, through, U-turns, also vehicle types and pedestrians and cyclists. If we're lucky, the computer vision's not that good at cyclists so far. Something about bicycles just being hollow really throws them off. So we work with other data collection methods to accommodate that. We also have highway vehicle detector stations. These are, you might have heard of rescue detectors. They're like inductive loops in the ground or radar based that are just detecting the presence of vehicles on highways and counting them. Next slide. This is the bicycle count program. You can go to the next one as well. There's 4 goals of this program. We're trying to understand cycling trends and patterns across the city, demographics and other characteristics of people cycling and using micromobility devices. I'm going to use cycling and micromobility kind of interchangeably. I think Jen did a great job explaining what it is, and we're still trying to find the best way to say it, and it's not just word salad. Yeah, number 3 there was understand the impact of new cycling infrastructure and understanding temporal seasonal variability in cycling travel patterns. Next slide, please. These are some of the tools at our disposal for counting micromobility. Like we have permanent counters that detect bicycles in bicycle lanes 24/7. We also have the network counts, which are just short-term counts. Like we can deploy those anywhere, and they can be pretty cheap and flexible. Cordon counts are an interesting project where we sort of draw a box around part of the city and count everyone entering and exiting that box. We set up count stations at every street that goes in and out. And it really gives a snapshot of a large-scale travel patterns, like route choice and that sort of thing. We can also do intercept surveys and use intercept surveys that are done by others to get more detailed, self-reported demographic information, that kind of thing. Next, please. This is a view of one of our permanent count stations. I think it's at Bloor and Oakmount. There's a display that actually tells you how many people rode by it every day, and I think for the whole year as well. At the very bottom of that picture, you can see a diamond in the lane, and that's the actual sensor that counts, detects usually metal in the bike's little wheel spokes. So we have 18 of these in the city. Something I want to say, like, look at that plot. Like, bike data is super variable, a lot more variable than motor vehicles. Like, there's weather, seasonal trends, construction and route choice is a big factor. Pandemics, working from home make big impacts on whether people choose to bike. And one thing that we can get from permanent counters is like a winter or summer split that it's hard to do from short-term counts. Overall, we see like about 34% of the summer average volumes is what we expect in the winter, or what we have observed in the winter. So when people say like no one is biking in the winter, that's simply not true. Some of these sites see almost about 50% in the winter. And like if you think about winters we're having recently, there may have only been a handful of days that weren't really good days for cycling. It's not a sort of situation where it just happens at one time a year. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So we can't have permanent counters everywhere. That means we do short-term bicycle counts as well. They are quick to deploy and flexible, but obviously one day or maybe a few days is not necessarily representative. But we can do things like look at what's happening on a road and then install some infrastructure and then repeat these studies again. And that's what's shown in this table. And we have the before and after daily cycling volumes at a range of places on Bloor Street, Yonge, and Queen's Park, University Avenue. The increases are substantial. This is what we're observing, like anywhere in the hundreds of percentage increases after installing infrastructure. We're seeing that when we install good infrastructure, people use it. Next slide. The cordon count I mentioned earlier, it's like a snapshot of travel patterns on a larger scale. On this map, you can see like kind of a box around the inner downtown core in green and the outer downtown core in red. Those are all the count stations that we set up and did like a one-day study on. And you can study infrastructure choice and routing and that kind of thing. So we did this in 2022. It's coming to open data. We just repeated this as well, and the data is being processed. Next slide. So 12-hour volumes from this cordon count. I mean, raw volumes are one thing, not a lot of context for them. Like we counted tens of thousands of bicycles. And one other thing that we did was classify trip purpose. Like we don't really know what people are up to when they're cycling, but we can see if they have an insulated bag for carrying food. We found that's about 10% of all the volume is for food delivery purposes. And like, you know, a lot of people are ordering delivery and getting it, a lot of it is delivered by bicycles. So what are the impacts of that on our transportation network, and what are the impacts of the decisions that we make as transportation network designers on those people who are doing their jobs? They're providing a service to us. And they may not be the advocates that we see for cycling typically as well. So there's an equity piece to this work. I'm gonna go to the next slide. This is a bit about device type. Like when we talk about micromobility, there's so many changes in the last like few years in what we're talking about. Like still, yeah, standard bicycles are the most common one here, but we see bike share is 12% of all the volume that we counted. This is back in 2022, and from bike shares data, we see huge increases every year. So I'm sure it's increased quite a bit more than that, and I'm excited to see the new numbers from the recent data. E-bikes were about 10% and e-scooters 4%. Currently, e-scooters are illegal to ride in Toronto, and we kind of want to know what's going on the streets. You know, it's not just about yes or no, or you got to wear a helmet or not. Like the design of the streets, the policies we make have an impact on these numbers, the reality of things. So we need to have this data to make those decisions. Next slide. This is a bit about infrastructure use. On the left side, I think the takeaway, you don't need to really understand everything here, but the takeaway is that cycle tracks really draw an outsized portion of the volumes compared to how prevalent they are on our roads. You know, like the roads that we studied here, 60% of them had no infrastructure. Only 15% of them had cycle tracks, yet that 15% was carrying 40% of all the volume that we counted. On the right side, like we're kind of seeing when we provide good infrastructure, it gets used. Cycle tracks and multi-use trails saw a 95% usage rate. That means much fewer active transportation. People riding micromobility vehicles are like interacting with cars, and fewer are riding on the sidewalk as well when we provide good infrastructure. I'm going to go to the next slide. Some concluding thoughts here. Active transportation mode, it's a component to emissions reduction, and demand for data in decision making has never been greater. It's great. There's lots of data out there. We can collect a lot, but it needs to be the right data. It needs to be good quality data. Overall, data is messy. Collecting good data is hard. Quality control is hard, and it's often a lot more time consuming than you might expect on the outset. Analysis is hard, but when it's done right, the results make an impact. They challenge preconceptions. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. I think you're wrong on one thing. You said it might be more difficult than you expect. No, that sounds difficult to me. I expected it. Just seeing all those graphs and charts and all those data points, it's unbelievable. I have no idea how your department puts that together. Okay, it's time for Q&A. So I'd like to ask, if you're at home, you can type in your questions on the bottom right hand of the screen. And if you're here, raise your hand. I already see a hand up there. A couple of hands up, so Leslie will get to you.
I have two questions for you, Adam, the one who just spoke. So really interesting to see how much the city can actually cover in terms of data collection. I was actually really shocked. I thought it would come from the private sector to do all that stuff. But anyways, my question was, you spoke about data sources. Could you just elaborate on like ride hailing data? I've never heard of it till like this year. I'm I'm like urban planning and for fourth year, and I've never heard of it till today. So yeah.
I hope I can elaborate on it because it's not my project, but ride-hailing data, Uber, Lyft, taxis, all of these companies collect data from their users and from their staff who are driving, and we purchase that data from them, actually. So we have a big data set of like trip-based data and time-based data, so we can understand where drivers are spending their time, if they're cruising, if they're en route, if they're waiting for passengers, and also, you know, distances, speeds, those types of things. Matt Lee, my colleague, did a presentation last year at this very event on the ride-hailing data, and it's available. You can watch it online for last year's Civic Lab TO. It was a really great presentation.
Okay, sure. Thank you. And I had another question, sorry. What's the difference between cordon counts and like regular byte counts?
Cordon just means we cordoned off an area, like you would tape it off or something, and we just counted everyone going in and out of that area.
Okay, for like a specific area.
Yeah,
okay.
That's all it is.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there's one right there and then one on the other side after you're finished, Leslie.
Yeah, so I understand like this is really important, especially to collect data, especially when we're looking at decisions that the city has to make in regards to what infrastructure to invest in. But when the province comes in and decides to do obnoxiously annoying things like just decide to remove all the bike lanes on one of our important corridors, how can you use the data to convince them otherwise, or to kind of sway the public opinion? Because we're collecting all this data, and clearly it's showing that the more infrastructure we build, the more it's being used, and it's benefiting the population. But then some very amazing premiers come and decide to just ignore all that and just decide to remove them or to construct a tunnel underneath the 401. So how can we use this data to actually benefit us? Because collecting data is one thing, then making use of it and actually making correct decisions, I think, is a whole other thing.
I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who works on the policy side. We've been providing lots of data to our city councilors, and it's been a really interesting journey the last few weeks, I'll just say.
So I think a challenge of our times is that there's a lot of politicians have, you can make decisions based on ideology, and you can make decisions based on data. And most decisions are somewhere in between, because politicians do have a tricky job trying to balance the data and what they think is right with what their voters seem to want, or what they perceive that their voters want. We have, our division created, in collaboration with Bike Share Toronto and with city planning and input from a wide team, created an, in my opinion, outstanding data-driven report that went to City Council just last week on this very topic. And I encourage you to look it up and to read it and to share it with your friends and talk about it and think about the role that you have as students, as individuals, and in the years going forward as professionals, to raise the awareness about the importance of data-driven decisions. I feel that we've done a lot. That we've done everything we can, and sometimes politicians make decisions that we don't agree with because they have their own reasons. But the best that we can do as public servants is to collect data, to do what Adam said, which is to make sure that it's accurate, that it's stuff that we can really stand behind, not only the raw data, but the analysis based on that data, and to put it forward. It is a constraint if you go into public service, that no matter how good your work is, it may not be supported by the decision makers, and that's a challenge we have to deal with.
Thank you. Just along that line, Andrew, I think one of your slides said that 91% of citizens, I guess Torontonians, agreed that we need to reduce emissions. Do they support bike lanes?
We don't ask that question specifically in the climate perception survey, but we do find that people who are concerned about climate are looking for things that they can do. And you would have seen on that same graphic that I think it was only 42% of respondents know what they can do. So, right, so they're looking for things like they want to reduce their emissions and they don't know how. So the typical ways of doing that from that 91% are changing the way you heat your home if you have control over that decision, and changing the way you get around, right? And so that doesn't have to be a bike lane. It could be transit, it could be walking, it could be an electric vehicle. Yeah, I mean, we don't specifically ask about climate and bike lane questions, but from my experience, you know, we need to provide viable opportunities and options for people to get around, and bike lanes are one of the most effective. It's one of the cheapest, both for the city, right, compared to building a tunnel under somewhere, but also for individuals, right? A bike is cheaper to operate, so it's definitely a good option and an important option for people to have.
Thank you for that. Speaking personally, I did not ride a bike until bike lanes were put on the Danforth. And once I saw it there, I said, what the hell? Let me give it a try. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Up there, Leslie.
Hello, my name is Chloe from TMU Planning. This is a question for Jennifer. So we understand that the climate crisis requires immediate and drastic action, and that one of our big GHG drivers in Toronto is transportation. But, you know, it doesn't really feel like we're putting our money where our mouth is, you know, when the rubber hits the road, walking the talk, so to say. Because, you know, we're really falling behind on our cycling network compared to peer cities like Paris, London, Montreal. And even our cycling network plan isn't ambitious enough, in my opinion, but we're also not even meeting the plan that we've set out over the past few years. And for the public transit side of things, Rapid TO is behind schedule. We're just working on Jane Street, and that should have been done back in 2021. So, you know, if we ignore the big elephant in the room, Bill 212, I mean, clearly the solution to Bill 212 is cut power to Premier Ford's home. Why aren't we accelerating the initiatives on these issues when we know how important it is? And you know, I remember speaking to Becky Katz 2 years ago from Transportation Services, and she said that a big issue is capacity. So why aren't we building the capacity municipally to start working on these initiatives at a faster pace? Because there clearly seems to be political will. Our cycling network, even though it requires 3 council votes to get a single bike lane installed, they usually pass with very wide margins if you ignore Councillor Holiday. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit on the challenges of accelerating our active and public transportation initiatives.
Clearly, you've done your research. And I strongly recommend you to approach your politicians with exactly those kinds of questions. I think, I mean, I'll repeat right now, but the answer to your question is very much in the vein of 2 things that have already been brought up today. The first one at the beginning of my presentation is this idea that the science is only good if we're willing to use it to make decisions. The data is only valuable if we are willing to believe it and act on it. And then the second piece is my response to the other individual a moment ago about what are we doing to advocate to the province about the bike lane Bill 212 and to try and get them to make different decisions. These days with social media, a lot of us can live in a bubble, and it feels like everybody we know feels the same way we do. And we go into social media and all the algorithms feed us news articles and commentary that reflects back to us the kinds of things that we have shown interest in through those tools. And we forget that there are other people in their own bubbles who are getting the same kind of feedback about how important it is to have, you know, a Ford F-150, or how important it is to, you know, feeding back to them this idea that if taking away space on a main street from motor vehicles and converting it into bike lanes is having a significant impact on their travel times. I think we have to practice the art of listening to other people, understanding what they need, and finding ways to collaborate, because things are very divisive, in my opinion, right now in politics. And sorry, I'm getting on a bit of a soapbox there. I think the challenge is that politicians don't always agree with the interpretation of the data that we have, or with the you know, it's not just politicians, it's voters also that don't agree necessarily with the platform and the priorities and the way of delivering on those priorities that the city has undertaken. And we see that reflected in the approach that the provincial government is taking right now. Get involved, educate yourselves, talk to your politicians, write, get your friends to write. Democracy does not just happen on election day. It has to be an ongoing process. And I encourage you not to just stay in, whatever your narrow field of work is or whatever you're paid to do during your hours. We all need our time to relax, but if you can take a slice of your personal time and devote it to trying to influence, I think that's well worthwhile investment of time.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We are out of time for questions. I just want to say to our three speakers, your commitment to making this city better is clear. So is your frustration. And I think a lot of us here in this room share both that commitment and frustration. The key, I think, is like Jennifer just wrapped up for us, is we are part of the democratic process, all of us here. And it's up to us to be active, become engaged citizen, so that we can make this city even better in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd now like to ask two Seneca Polytechnic students to say a few words. Yosef Jamul and Satya Kamundari.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you so much, Gus. Firstly, on behalf of the students from all institutions of higher learning, I would like to sincerely thank Mayor Olivia Chow for her spontaneous visit and for sharing valuable insights on the city's initiatives, including affordable housing, promoting cycling infrastructure, and inspiring students to actively contribute to shaping the future of our city. We also want to thank Andrew Plunkett for sharing valuable insights on the impact of climate change, both globally and within our city. Additionally, we appreciate his efforts in highlighting Toronto's climate action transfer TO. We are excited about and look forward to the successful implementation of the transfer TO net zero strategy by the year 2040 or sooner. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to Jennifer Neese for enlightening us about how transportation services unite us as a community while paving the way for a greener future. Additionally, we deeply appreciate her insights into the city's initiative on climate resilience to address various weather conditions we face, as well as her valuable information on the benefits of micromobility usage. Additionally, we appreciate the insights shared by Adam Duvenstein from the Data and Analytics team at Transportation Services for showing us the importance of gathering data and analytics to improve transportation services across the entire city. By collecting traffic and collision data, the city can better understand and address challenges to improve overall traffic flow. This gave us a clear perspective on how data and technology, such as the use of MyoVision cameras, are utilized to ensure the efficiency and connectivity of the city. And now I will pass it on to my colleague, Satya Kamundari. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. I would like to say thank you in Mohawk. I learned it from my friend from Cornwall Island. It is Niawe Gova, which means thank you very much, or Niawe, thank you. Firstly, Niawe to all the higher education institutions and professors for coming together and making this a wonderful learning experience and an opportunity. Thank you to Joe Mevek for spearheading this. Niawe, thanks to Jeff Moore from the City Manager's Office. And thank you to all the wonderful city staff for all the extra work to provide us with this opportunity. Thank you, Niawe, to the City Council and our dear Mayor Chow for sharing the space, welcoming us, and giving us insights in all these wonderful technologies, wonderful opportunities, and giving us so much insight for the future. Niawe, to all the students, thank you for the friendships and for sharing this experience with us. I look forward to all of us becoming active citizens and being instrumental in the future of Toronto and making this an even better place for the next generation. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing every one of you.
Thank you. We've been doing this for a few years now, and I learn more and more every time we do it. I can't believe how inspired I feel after all of these. But as you've learned today, something very important, we need data. We need to understand what we're doing, how we're doing, and how we can do it better. And you'll remember at the beginning of the semester, Tharshi asked you to fill out a survey. And hopefully you did. You're going to be receiving another one, and she'll explain it. She should be on the WebEx. Okay. There she is now, so take it over.
Thanks, Gus. And apologies, everyone, if you hear a loud noise in the background. There seems to be some construction where I am. But anyways, hi, everyone. My name is Tharshi. I'm a second-year PhD student in planning and geography at the University of Toronto. And as you may remember, I am the graduate researcher for Civic Lab TO, and we're really excited to launch the second and final survey for our project. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I really hope you've all enjoyed your semester and learned a lot from this course. So as a reminder, we created a set of surveys to better understand how we can improve the course for future cohorts and ensure that others also have this opportunity too. Not only will your responses help better the course, but we also aim to write a journal article and report the extent to which classes like this affect civic education and engagement. So in order to do this, we really need your help. Huge thanks to those who filled out the first survey. We really need you to fill out the second survey as well. So for those of you who did participate, please look out for an email from myself. It'll be from t.jayaveer@mail.utoronto.ca. And you'll receive a personalized link from me this afternoon. Please do not share this link with anyone because it is personal to you. And it's a personal survey link that's connected to your answers from the first survey. So that's why it's kind of set up this way. You'll have until about 5 p.m. on December 6th to complete the second survey, and we really appreciate your participation. And like I mentioned before, future students will really benefit from your involvement. So thank you again, and bye for now.
Thank you, Tharshi. She said you have until December 6th, but you know, I know it's the end of the semester. You guys are going to be very busy, a lot of papers to write. So how about this? How about you make a commitment to get home right after this and fill it out right then, as soon as you get it in your mailbox today. It's really important that we get that data. So the semester is ended. Thank you, everyone. Please go have fun, enjoy the rest of the semester, and more importantly, do what Jennifer said, get active. Get out there, make this better. Take care, everyone.
I saw it written and I saw it say